You know how sometimes one little thing can completely derail your life? Yeah, that's what happened to me. My name's Jenna, and just 2 weeks before my engagement party, my world imploded. I was 24, head over heels in love with Mark, my boyfriend of 2 years. We'd been planning this bash for ages. The venue, the food, the music, everything was falling into place. Then bam. My mom called. "Jenna, cancel the engagement party," she barked into the phone. I almost dropped my cell. "What? Mom, are you kidding me?" "No jokes here. Sarah just got promoted and we're celebrating on your engagement day." Sarah's my little sister, 2 years younger, and she's always been Mom and Dad's favorite. But this was a whole new level of insane. "Mom, come on. I've been planning this for ages. I'm not canceling because Sarah got a pat on the back at work," I said, trying to keep my cool. "Don't be selfish, Jenna. This is big for your sister. Same guests, different party, just reschedule." I felt my blood pressure skyrocket. "No way, Mom. This is my engagement we're talking about. I'm not canceling." End of story. She started screeching then, her voice so high-pitched it made my ears ring. I didn't even bother listening. I just hung up, staring at my phone in disbelief. All these childhood memories came flooding back. It was always like this, Sarah first, me second. I remembered my 18th birthday. Mom and Dad completely forgot until my grandma called to wish me a happy birthday. They scrambled to throw together some lame celebration with a grocery store cake and a gift card. Talk about pathetic, especially compared to the week-long trip they'd sent Sarah on for her sweet 16 just a few months earlier. Just then, Mark walked in. One look at my face, and he knew something was wrong. "Jenna, what's wrong?" he asked, sitting down next to me. I spilled everything. The call, Mom's demands, the years of being overlooked. He listened patiently, his face getting darker with every word. "That's bull," he said when I finished. "We're not canceling anything." I nodded, so grateful for his support. "I know, it's just... Why can't they ever put me first? Just once?" "Because they're idiots," Mark said firmly. "But I put you first. Always." I looked up at him, managing a small smile. "I know. That's why I'm marrying you, dummy." We spent the rest of the night going over our plans, making sure everything was perfect. As I drifted off to sleep, I tried to push thoughts of my family out of my head. This was my time, my moment. I wasn't going to let them mess it up. The next morning, I woke up determined to forget about Mom's crazy call and focus on the party. I had a million things to do. Invites to send, decorations to finalize, you name it. Then, my phone pinged. It was my cousin, Chloe. "Hey, Jenna, everything okay with you and Mark? Heard you guys split up." I stared at my phone, totally confused. Where'd she get that idea? "What? No way, we're fine. Who told you that?" I typed back quickly. Chloe's reply popped up almost instantly. "Weird. Aunt Lisa said your mom told her the engagement was off." My stomach dropped like a stone. I called Chloe right away. "What's going on?" I asked as soon as she picked up. "I don't know, Jenna. Aunt Lisa called last night, said your mom told her you and Mark had this huge fight and called everything off. She said we should all go to Sarah's promotion party instead." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Chloe, that's all lies. We're still engaged. The party's still on. Mom wanted me to cancel for Sarah's thing, but I said no way." There was a pause. "Oh, crap, Jenna. I'm so sorry. I had no idea." I spent the next hour on the phone with Chloe, piecing together what happened. Turns out my mom had gone behind my back to cancel my engagement party. She'd called every single relative on the guest list, spinning this wild story about Mark and me breaking up and redirecting them all to Sarah's promotion party. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "I'm going to fix this mess. Can you help spread the word that the engagement's still on?" "Of course," Chloe replied without missing a beat. "I'll start calling people right now." After hanging up, I just sat on my couch, trying to wrap my head around it all. My own mother had tried to sabotage my engagement party. It was almost too crazy to believe. Mark found me there an hour later when he got home from work. One look at my face, and he knew something was up. I told him everything. Mom's calls, the lies, the whole Sarah party redirect. With each word, I could see the anger building in his eyes. "That's it," he said when I finished. "We're cutting them off. All of them. Your parents, Sarah, the whole bunch." I knew he was right, but the thought of cutting off my family scared me. Who would I be without them? Even if they treated me like dirt, they were still my family. "Let's focus on fixing this first," I said. "We need to let everyone know the engagement's still on." Mark nodded, his jaw set. "Okay, where do we start?" We spent the rest of the night in damage control mode, sending emails, making calls, posting on social media. I wrote this long message explaining everything and sent it to everyone on our guest list. It was exhausting and humiliating, having to explain over and over that no, Mark and I hadn't broken up, and yes, the engagement party was still happening. By the time we finished, it was way past midnight. My voice was shot from all the talking, and my eyes burned from staring at screens. "We did it," Mark said, pulling me into a hug. "It's going to be okay." I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Mom's betrayal had opened up old wounds, all the times I'd been overlooked, all the times Sarah had been the favorite. It all came rushing back. The next day, I decided to visit Aunt Mary. She's Dad's sister, and has always been pretty decent to me. I figured I'd invite her to the engagement party in person and clear up any confusion. When I got to her place, I heard voices coming from the living room. I was about to call out a hello when I caught a snippet of conversation that made me freeze. "Can't believe Jenna would do such a thing," Aunt Mary was saying. "Canceling her own engagement party to spite her sister. So childish." My heart sank. It was a new lie, a fresh twist on the narrative, designed to further discredit me. I was about to storm in and set things straight when another voice chimed in. "I know, right? Poor Sarah must be crushed. After all that hard work to get promoted, and now Jenna is trying to steal her thunder." I recognized that voice. It was my cousin Katie. I always thought we were close, but there she was, gossiping about me behind my back. I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped into the room. "Is that what you really think of me?" Both women jumped like they'd seen a ghost. Aunt Mary recovered first, plastering on a fake smile. "Jenna, sweetie, we didn't hear you come in." "Obviously," I said, my voice ice cold. "I came to invite you to my engagement party, but it seems like you've already made up your minds about me." Katie at least had the decency to look ashamed. "Jenna, we didn't mean—" "Save it," I cut her off. "I want to know exactly what Mom told you." For the next hour, I listened as they spilled the beans on Mom's tall tale. According to her, I threw a fit when I heard about Sarah's promotion, demanding she reschedule her celebration. When Sarah said no, I supposedly canceled my own engagement party out of spite, saying I'd rather not get married at all than share the spotlight. It was ludicrous, a complete fabrication. By the time they finished, I was shaking with anger. "None of that is true," I said, my voice trembling. Mom called me and demanded I cancel my engagement party for Sarah's celebration. I said no, and now she's spreading lies to sabotage me. I told them everything. The forgotten birthdays, the constant comparisons, years of feeling like I was never good enough. By the time I finished, both women were in tears. "Oh, Jenna," Aunt Mary said, reaching for my hand. "We had no idea. We should have known better than to believe such crazy stories." I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "Look, I appreciate the apology, but right now I need your help. The engagement party is still on, and I need you to spread the word. Can you do that?" They both nodded eagerly, looking relieved to have a chance to make things right. As I left Aunt Mary's house, I felt a mix of emotions: anger at Mom's betrayal, hurt that my family so easily believed the worst about me, but also a tiny bit hopeful. At least some of the truth was out now. The big day arrived, and boy, was I a bundle of nerves. As Mark and I walked up to the hall, I held my breath. We pushed open the doors, bracing myself for whatever mess we might find inside. And then, holy cow, I couldn't believe my eyes. The place was buzzing with people. Smiling faces turned to greet us, and this warm, fuzzy feeling washed over me. The room was packed with relatives, not just the ones we'd managed to reach, but faces I hadn't seen in ages. "I can't believe you all came," I said, my voice choked up. Uncle Joe, Dad's brother, came up and gave Mark a hearty slap on the back. "Of course we came. Did you really think we'd miss this? Though I gotta say, those rumors about your canceled engagement sure spread like wildfire. Looks like they backfired big time." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Guess they did. As Mark and I made our way through the crowd, soaking up all the congrats and well wishes, I couldn't help but notice Mom, Dad, and Sarah were nowhere to be seen. No texts, no emails, not even a grudging congrats. But surprisingly, their absence felt more like a relief than a letdown. Instead, I found myself gravitating towards Mark's parents, who were beaming at us with genuine pride and love. His mom hugged me tight, whispering, "We're so proud of you, Jenna. You're already part of our family." The party was in full swing when suddenly there was a commotion near the dance floor. I couldn't believe my eyes. There was my 80-year-old grandma in the middle, showing off what she called an incendiary dance of her youth. "Come on, you young'uns," she called out, eyes twinkling mischievously. "Let me show you how we used to cut a rug back in my day." The crowd went wild as Grandma twirled and swayed, moving surprisingly well for her age. Soon, others joined in, and the dance floor turned into this amazing multi-generational dance-off. As I mingled with the guests, I couldn't help but overhear bits of gossip about all the family drama leading up to today. "Can you believe what Jenna's mother tried to pull?" I heard Cousin Katie say to another relative. "Trying to cancel her own daughter's engagement party for her other daughter's work thing? It's nuts." "I know," the other voice replied. "Poor Jenna has always gotten the short end of the stick in that family. I'm glad she's finally standing up for herself." Instead of feeling embarrassed or upset by these chats, I felt validated. For once, my relatives were seeing the truth about my family dynamics, and they were on my side. As the night went on, I found myself feeling truly happy and celebrated, maybe for the first time ever. The absence of my immediate family, which I'd been so worried about, instead felt like this huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The day after our kick-ass engagement party, Mark and I were chilling on the couch, reliving the awesome moments from the night before, when my phone rang. My stomach did a flip when I saw it was Mom calling. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello?" "You ungrateful, nasty girl," Mom's voice screeched through the speaker. "How dare you?" I held the phone away from my ear, her angry rant clear even at arm's length. Mark looked at me worried, but I shook my head, signaling I'd handle it. "Mom, what? Don't you mom me," she cut me off. "You've humiliated your sister. Only 3 people showed up to her party." 3, and they were just those nosy old aunts who'd show up to the opening of an envelope. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. "I'm sorry you're disappointed, but..." Disappointed? "Sarah is crushed. She cried all night. This was supposed to be her moment, and you ruined it with your selfishness." I felt my patience wearing thin. "Mom, I've been planning my engagement party for months. Sarah's promotion party was a last-minute thing, and she knew it clashed with my engagement." "That's no excuse. Family comes first, Jenna. But clearly, you wouldn't know anything about that." Before I could respond, she hung up on me. Immediately after the call, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Sarah. "Hope you're happy. You've ruined everything. I'll make you pay for this humiliation." I showed the message to Mark, who frowned. She can't be serious. The next 2 weeks were quiet, and I started to think maybe the storm had blown over. But then, one afternoon, there was a surprise knock at our door. I opened it to find Mark's parents standing there, looking worried. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, what a surprise. Is everything okay?" They exchanged a glance before Mrs. Thompson spoke. "Jenna, dear, can we come in? We need to talk to you about something." My heart sank as I showed them to the living room. Once we were all seated, Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. "Jenna, we've heard some troubling rumors. There's been talk that you've been cheating on Mark. I felt like I'd been slapped. What? That's ridiculous. I would never. We know, dear, Mrs. Thompson interrupted gently. We've known you for years. We don't believe it for a second. Relief washed over me, quickly followed by anger, as I realized where these rumors probably came from. It's my sister, I said, my voice shaking a bit. She threatened to get back at me for ruining her promotion party. She must be spreading these lies. Mr. Thompson nodded grimly. We figured as much. We wanted to come to you directly, rather than let these rumors spread. As they left, promising to help squash any rumors they heard, I felt all mixed up inside. I was touched by the Thompsons' support and trust in me, but I was also furious at Sarah. How could she stoop so low? A few days after the drama with Mark's parents, I got a call from Grandma. Her voice, usually so cheery, sounded worried. Jenna, sweetie, she started. I've heard about all this mess with your parents and Sarah. Don't you think it's time to bury the hatchet? I sighed, feeling the weight of her expectations. Grandma, it's not that easy. They've really hurt me. I know, honey, but they're family. Surely there's a way to patch things up. I could hear the plea in her voice, and it tugged at my heartstrings. Grandma had always been there for me, even when the rest of my family wasn't. I hated disappointing her. What do you think I should do? I asked, already dreading the answer. Why don't you try reaching out, make a peace offering, show them you're willing to mend fences? I closed my eyes, torn between my love for Grandma and my need to protect myself. After a long moment, I sighed. Okay, Grandma, I'll try. For you. That evening, I stood on my parents' doorstep, heart pounding. As soon as I stepped inside, I knew this wasn't going to go well. Sarah was there, her face like thunder. So, she spat, you think you can just waltz in here and throw me a pity party? That's not what I started, but she cut me off. I don't need your handouts, Jenna. Do you think that makes up for what you did? I should have had my party on your day, then people would have actually shown up. I stared at her, shocked by the venom in her voice. Sarah, I'm trying to make things right. Make things right? She screeched. You ruined everything. As usual, it's all about you. I looked to my parents, hoping for some support, but they just stood there, nodding along with Sarah's tirade. She's right, Jenna, Mom said. You've always been so selfish. I felt something snap inside me. Without a word, I turned and walked out, ignoring their calls behind me. I visited my grandma again. She greeted me with a hopeful smile. How did it go, dear? Instead of answering, I pulled out my phone. I recorded the conversation, Grandma. I think you need to hear this. Her eyes widened in surprise, but she nodded. I hit play, and Sarah's furious voice filled the room. As the recording played, I watched Grandma's face change from hope to shock, then to deep disappointment. When it finished, there was a long silence. Then, to my surprise, Grandma reached out and took my hand. Oh, Jenna, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so sorry. I had no idea it was this bad. I owe you an apology. I shouldn't have pushed you to reconcile. I felt tears prick my eyes. It's okay, Grandma. You didn't know. She shook her head. No, it's not okay. I should have believed you from the start. I wanted so badly for our family to be whole. We sat in silence for a while, both processing what had happened. Finally, Grandma spoke again. Jenna, dear, I want you to know something. Family isn't just about blood. It's about love, respect, and support. And from what I've seen and heard, Mark and his family give you that. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for choosing your own happiness. The morning after my heart-to-heart with Grandma, I woke up to my phone buzzing like crazy. It was a barrage of angry texts from my parents. My heart sank as I read them, realizing Grandma must have spilled the beans about the recording. How dare you record our private conversations? Mom's message screamed. You're nothing but a sneaky, ungrateful snitch. Dad's message wasn't any better. I can't believe you'd stoop so low as to secretly record us and then play it for your grandmother. You betrayed this family for the last time." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Even when faced with proof of their own nasty behavior, they still found a way to make me the bad guy. This latest betrayal was the last straw. I was done with my toxic family. In the weeks that followed, I tried to focus on work and my life with Mark. But Sarah, it seemed, had other plans. Her vindictiveness went into overdrive as she launched a full-on harassment campaign against me. It started with whispers at work. Colleagues would suddenly clam up when I walked into a room, only to start whispering again the moment I left. I soon found out Sarah had been spreading nasty rumors about me, everything from calling me incompetent to telling outright lies about my personal life. Then came the anonymous messages on social media. Hateful comments popped up on my posts, each one nastier than the last. I couldn't prove it was Sarah, but the tone and content left little doubt in my mind. But Sarah's cruelty hit a new low when she tried to contact Mark. One evening, he came home looking troubled. "Jenna, I got a weird call today," he said. "It was Sarah. She tried to tell me you were cheating on me." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What?" "Mark, you know that's not true." He quickly reassured me. "Of course I know that. I shut her down right away. But Jenna, this is getting out of hand." I nodded, feeling a mix of anger and exhaustion. "I know. I just don't know how to make it stop." As it turned out, I didn't have to do anything. Sarah's obsession with revenge started to bite her in the butt. Her work started to suffer as she spent more and more time plotting against me. Her colleagues noticed her weird behavior, the constant whispering, the long stretches spent on her phone instead of working. It wasn't long before her bosses took notice. I heard through the office grapevine that Sarah had gotten an official warning for her declining performance, but even that didn't seem to stop her. Then, about a month into her harassment campaign, the news broke. Sarah had been demoted. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The very promotion she'd been so desperate to celebrate, the one that had kicked off this whole ugly mess, was now gone. After all the Sarah drama died down, I threw myself into wedding planning like it was my job. We finally picked this gorgeous outdoor spot. Picture a fairy tale garden with this cute little gazebo where we'd say our I do's. As we stood there, imagining our big day, Mark gave my hand a squeeze. "You happy?" he asked softly. I looked up at him, feeling all warm and fuzzy inside. "Happier than I've ever been," I replied, and I meant it. With the venue locked down, we moved on to picking our wedding squad. I asked my ride-or-die friends, the ones who'd stuck by me through all the craziness, to be my bridesmaids. They all said yes, which was awesome. Then came the invite list. I sat at our dining table, addressing envelopes to all the relatives and friends who'd had our backs during the past few crazy months. As I wrote each name, I felt this wave of gratitude for these people who'd shown me what real family was all about. But when I got to the bottom of my list, I paused. There were 3 names I hadn't written: Mom, Dad, and Sarah. I stared at those blank spaces, feeling all kinds of emotions swirling inside me. Mark found me there, staring at the paper. "You okay?" he asked, putting a comforting hand on my shoulder. I looked up at him, tears in my eyes. "I don't think I can invite them, Mark, after everything that's happened." He nodded understandingly. "It's your call, Jenna. Whatever you decide, I've got your back." I took a deep breath, then put down the pen. "No," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "They don't deserve to be there. This day is about celebrating love and support, and that's not something they've shown me." As I said the words, I felt like this huge weight lifted off my shoulders. It was a bittersweet moment, realizing that cutting ties with my toxic family was the right move for my future. Yeah, there was sadness, but also this overwhelming sense of relief. The weeks flew by, and before I knew it, our wedding day was here. As I stood in front of the mirror in my bridal suite, fiddling with my veil, I was hit with this sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. As I walked down the aisle towards Mark, I saw the faces of those who'd stood by us. Mark's parents beaming with pride, my grandma dabbing at her eyes with a hanky, friends and relatives who'd chosen to support us despite all the family drama. These were my people. the ones who'd shown me what real love and support looked like. When I reached Mark, he took my hands in his eyes shining with love. As we said our vows, I felt this sense of rightness settle over me. This was where I belonged. At the reception, surrounded by laughter and joy, I had this big realization. My engagement party, all those months ago, wasn't just about celebrating our upcoming marriage. It was the first day of my new life, a life where I wasn't an outsider anymore, but the creator of my own happiness. As Mark and I swayed to our first dance as husband and wife, I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling truly at peace. The journey had been tough, yeah, but it had led me here, to a place of strength, wisdom, and genuine happiness. "I love you," Mark whispered in my ear. "I love you too," I replied, my heart feeling like it was bursting. In that moment, I knew that whatever life threw our way, we'd face it together. And for the first time in my life, I was excited about the future, not scared of it. This was my fresh start, and I was ready to dive in head first. Story 2. I never had that unique sisterly closeness that you read about in novels or see in movies. When I arrived, Jessica was 10 years old, almost a different generation when she was in high school and had her first crushes. I continued to play with dolls. Our parents appeared to have a particular place in their hearts for their firstborn, much like many other parents whose children live far away. They believed Jessica could do no wrong, and that belief persisted far into our adult lives. Jessica was getting married to David, a local accountant she had met at church, when I turned 18, and began attending college in our hometown. I had vivid memories of her wedding day. Our parents were sobbing uncontrollably because she was so happy. Simply put, I was glad I could save money by living at home while I was in college. I had no idea how much that choice would cost me. Jessica quickly became comfortable in her new job as a housewife. She revealed she was pregnant a few months after the wedding. "Robin, isn't it magnificent?" she exclaimed. "You will become an aunt." Unaware that this statement would totally ruin my college experience, I nodded and grinned. 3 months following the birth of tiny Tommy, Jessica began to unexpectedly visit our parents' home. "All I need is a vacation," she would say, virtually flinging Tommy into her mother's embrace. "Robin, I'll be back in a few hours. Tell me how she may be of assistance." When my mother would knock on my door, I would be in my room, surrounded by notes and textbooks. "Could you watch Tommy while I prepare dinner, Robin, honey?" It became into an everyday occurrence. A wailing infant and my mother's mild but insistent pleas for assistance kept interrupting my study sessions. It was tiring, but I tried to balance everything. Then, at Sunday supper, Jessica revealed yet another shocking revelation, just when I felt like I had partially adapted to the situation. "We're expecting another baby," she said. "Tommy will grow up to be an older brother." 2 years later, I was in my last year of college, juggling the demands of a crying newborn named Michael and a 3-year-old Tommy who was running about the house. I was also working very hard to study for my examinations. After she gave off both children one day so she could go to the movies with her friends, I remarked, "Jessica, have you thought of getting a babysitter?" She gave me the expression as if I had advised her to sell her kids. "Are you aware of the current high cost of babysitting?" She laughed. "In addition, our family can monitor them for free, so why should we pay someone to do it?" With her reading glasses, our mother, who was presently pursuing Tommy as he ran around the house, simply nodded absently. Naturally, she was unconcerned. She would never withhold anything from her beloved firstborn Jessica. In the meantime, our home was in total disarray. Tommy left a path of devastation in his wake, treating each space as though it were his own playground. He used my notes as drawing paper and dumped all of my college files on the floor when I woke up one morning. The chaos was always accompanied by baby Michael's shrill cries. One afternoon, Mom reached out to Robin in a strained voice. "Come assist with the guys, please. Today I can no longer put up with them." Downstairs, I heard a crash, and then Tommy's joyful laughter. I yelled back through my closed door, "I can't, ma'am." "Next week is my last exam week." "You're being self-centered." Dad's voice added to the confusion. "These are your nephews. Family is helpful. Family." To muffle their voices, I cranked up my music, the sound of someone else crashing down the steps. My hands were trembling as I underlined key material in my textbook. Although I felt bad, I also understood that failing these tests would have a significant impact on my future. The following several weeks were stressful, but in spite of all the interruptions, I graduated with honors. Finding a place of my own was my top objective after landing a position at Anderson Associates. Although the initial pay wasn't very high, it was sufficient to cover the rent for a modest one-bedroom flat across town. I hadn't felt so calm in years until that first night at my flat. No yelling, no sobbing, no mayhem. Blessed stillness, please. After 2 years, I had established a nice life for myself. Then, Jessica's third pregnancy was revealed. During one of our weekly phone calls, Mom informed me that it was another boy. Isn't it amazing? Yes, fantastic, I remarked, already seeing the heightened mayhem. How are you and your father currently managing Michael and Tommy? Mom sighed. They have a lot of energy. Every weekend, Jessica still invites them over, claims she needs a vacation right now, with a new baby on the way. I could sense the tiredness she was attempting to conceal as her voice drifted off. The next time I'm home, my parents appeared older than they actually were. Tommy and Michael appeared to be playing a game that involved flinging all of the couch cushions onto the floor as they hurried around the home. After dropping them off, Jessica went to breakfast with her pals. Mom, Dad, I murmured cautiously as I observed them pursuing the lads. This doesn't have to be done correctly, you know. You are free to refuse, Jessica. Dad turned to face me, his face flushed from rage or effort. It's really self-centered of you to say that. Robin, family does this. Setting limits has nothing to do with selfishness. I argued. Both of you appear worn out. You have no idea what family is. Even when she pulled up another pillow from the floor, Mom snapped. You never got it. When you become a parent yourself, you'll succeed. That day, I was depressed and furious as I left their home. Nothing seems to have changed. Jessica continued to exploit. She was still being supported by our parents, and for pointing out the obvious, I was still the villain. My weekend trips home become harder and harder to bear with time. Every time I entered my parents' house, I felt as though I had entered a combat zone. Tommy, who is now 5 years old, and Michael, who is 3 years old, had a particularly terrible tendency of using their younger brother, Kevin, who is 6 months old, as an unwitting target during mealtimes. One Sunday meal in particular was awful. Tommy loaded his spoon with mashed potatoes and threw it across the table at Michael, who responded with a bunch of green peas, while I watched in fear. As his elder brothers laughed, Kevin, caught in the crossfire, ended himself crying and spilling baby food down his face. It was more than I could handle. Enough. Everyone jumped as I slapped my fist on the table. Tommy, Michael, come on over here immediately. They looked at me and were accustomed to being challenged. Take a look at the mess you created. I indicated the walls and floor covered with food splatters. And observe your brother in tears. This is not acceptable. Are you going to tidy up now? To my own amazement, and to everyone else's. In fact, they got to work cleaning. Perhaps it was the surprise of someone confronting them at last. Jessica rushed in the door at that moment, on her way back from her monthly spa visit. What's happening? Seeing her elder boys on their hands and knees, mopping the floor, she made a demand. I mentioned that they had created a mess during lunch. It's being cleaned up. Jessica's cheeks flushed. You dare! They're only kids. You're treating them cruelly. Cruel! Jessica, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Kevin was being thrown food. He was in tears. This behavior is unacceptable. You are a childless couple, she spat. You have no understanding. Our parents sat there looking worn out and discouraged, but I turned to them in the hopes that they would support me. I found it incomprehensible that they did not confront Jessica and continued to allow her to exploit their generosity. For 3 more years, life continued in this manner, with me minimizing my trips home to get away from the mayhem. Then everything was different. When James and I first met, I had never dated anyone like him. Astute. Nice. Most significantly, he saw the value of limits. We got together at a coffee shop close to my workplace. After he unintentionally took my latte, we spoke for hours. We presented our families to one another after 6 months of dating. The difference between his parents' quiet household and my parents' chaotic one was always noticeable. His parents, Robert and Diana, were sweet individuals who spoke out about as frequently as they burnt supper. Our family had always celebrated Christmas, and since James and I were recently engaged, this year was meant to be especially memorable. Mom's decorations were extravagant. The house was wonderful from all of her Christmas preparations, the tree looked lovely, and the gifts were beautifully wrapped in matching paper. The mood was joyous and welcoming when James and I came early to assist. In the corner, my cousins Mark and Sarah were already there with their children, quietly playing board games. Great Aunt Martha, one of our relatives who had come from out of town, seized me in a strong embrace right away. She admired my engagement ring and said, "Let me see that ring, dear. What a charming young man James is. Together, you two will be incredibly content." It was everything picture perfect. With the meal, Mom had gone above and beyond. Even the children were quite well behaved, saying please and thank you as Dad recited his favorite stories. When cookies are presented, it reminded me of a Christmas movie scene. The front door then sprang open. Happy Christmas! The sound of Jessica's 3 sons barging into the home like a cyclone instantly drowned out her words. Tommy, who is now 8 years old, nearly knocked Great Uncle George down when he raced into him. His relatives, who had been reading the count discreetly, began to pursue Michael. For no apparent reason, 3-year-old Kevin was yelling at the top of his lungs. Boys will be boys. Before anybody could stop them, Jessica giggled while her husband David looked at his phone, totally detached from the situation. Under the tree, Tommy and Michael found the gifts. They began tearing them open instead of merely shaking or staring at them. Each and every one, even those that weren't intended for them. Oh my God. As Tommy tore through a nicely wrapped surprise intended for my cousin's daughter, Great Aunt Martha gasped. I should probably go. I can't handle the excitement of this. There were others besides her, 20 minutes or less, unable to cope with the mayhem my nephews were causing. Half of our older relatives had excused themselves and gone. Even awful was the ensuing supper. The kids of my cousin sat calmly, waiting their turn to talk while using their napkins. My nephews, on the other hand, transformed the dinner table into a battleground. Kevin was putting cranberry sauce in his hair, while Tommy and Michael threw dinner rolls at each other across the table. Mom begged pathetically, "Children, please," but they paid no attention to her. The tipping point occurred when Tommy purposefully took up his can of soda and dumped it all over Mom's homemade Christmas pie while grinning mischievously. Tommy, the one she'd been working on for hours that morning. Multiple voices yelled simultaneously, but Jessica only chuckled. She said, "He's just being playful." As David kept browsing through his phone, I glanced at my family looks around the table. The discomfort, the criticism, the shock. As my sister and her spouse sat there, they pretended that this was usual behavior. It was more than I could handle. The mayhem, the utter lack of discipline, and the sight of my mother's destroyed pie. Everything was too much. I sprang to my feet, my chair scuffing the floor. "I can't remain here," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "This is absurd." "Jessica, you're doing nothing to stop your kids' repulsive behavior." The only sound coming from the table was Kevin pounding his spoon on his plate. Jessica's cheeks flushed. "Oh, you're referring to Rich." She lost her temper. "Robin, you don't have any kids. When you have children of your own, you have no clue how difficult it is to raise them. You can then evaluate my parenting." I chuckled bitterly and pointed to my cousin's kids, who were sitting quietly and appeared uneasy about the whole thing. "Really? How would you then explain them?" The children of Sarah and Mark had behaved themselves admirably throughout the day. They behave politely. Nothing is destroyed by them. Food is not thrown by them. How can that be? If it said that kids are uncontrollable, simply said, "Those children are different," Jessica sputtered. "No, the distinction is that Mark and Sarah are real parents to their kids," I fired back. "When was the last time you disciplined your children for their behavior?" The tears filled Jessica's eyes. "You're really mean. My kids have always been disliked by you." As I struggled to hold my boy steady, I murmured, "I don't hate them. I detest seeing kids grow up without any direction or rules. I detest seeing the destruction of my parents' home, each time you come. I detest your belief that this conduct is typical. James put a soft touch on my shoulder as he stood next to me. Quietly, he murmured, "I think we should go." Jessica was now sobbing uncontrollably as her sons carried on with their mayhem, utterly unaffected by the drama taking place all around them. David seemed slightly irritated by the interruption when he eventually looked up from his phone. "Merry Christmas to all of you." With a sarcastic tone, I said, "I'm sorry, Mom, but I'm unable to watch this any longer." To the sound of Tommy's joyful shout as he threw another dinner roll across the room and Jessica's weeping, James and I departed. We were working on the wedding guest list at our flat 2 months later. As we glanced at the names, the Christmas catastrophe was still very much in our memories. "The lads cannot be invited." Finally expressing what we were both thinking, I said, "Everything will be ruined by them. Can you picture them at the event? At the reception?" James gave a nod. "What if we just eliminate children entirely? No children younger than 16, please. It's not personal that way. It is only a general policy. You don't believe that anyone will take offense?" "Some may be," he acknowledged. "It's more difficult to disagree with Sarah and Mark if it applies to everyone equally. They may be sad that their children can't go, but at least they'll realize it's not directed at them." I reflected on the quiet ceremony we had been preparing. No mayhem, no arguments over food, no yelling kids, just a classy celebration of our love with grown-ups who were able to truly enjoy the occasion. A wedding without children. I tried out the words again. "What do you know? I genuinely adore it." I decided to tell my family the news on a Sunday afternoon. In hindsight, perhaps I ought to have done it without Jessica and her children around. However, it was like trying to catch lightning in a bottle when we discovered that they were not at our parents' place. Upon entering, Tommy threw a remote control into the air, which I had to avoid while pursuing Michael. After his siblings knocked over his blocks for the 3rd time, Kevin was sobbing on the ground. "Dad, Mum," I began speaking louder above the commotion. "I need to discuss the wedding with you all, Jessica." "Yes, honey." While cleaning up the juice that Kevin had spilt on the carpet, Mom spoke. I inhaled deeply. "James and I have made the decision to have no children at the wedding. There won't be any kids younger than 16 present." Jessica exploded when the mayhem paused for around 2 seconds. "What?" She sprung off the couch and shouted, "That is not possible. How about my boys? All youngsters are subject to the policy." I tried to explain in a calm voice, "Not just yours. It's because you despise them." Jessica's voice was growing louder with every word, and she was now flushed. "My kids have always been disliked by you. You're a terrible sister and aunt." Even though Tommy picked that moment to topple a vase, I insisted, "No, I love your boys." However, you witnessed what transpired during Christmas. The ruined pie, the food fight, and the gifts being ripped open. It was just children being children. Jessica, no. No, it wasn't. The children of Mark and Sarah were present to commemorate. Nothing was destroyed by them. No one else's Christmas was ruined by them. Oh, the ideal cousins are here once more. Ideal kids. Jessica let out a scream. "You know what, though? Since we won't be attending your priceless wedding, you won't have to worry about my rowdy kids." I experienced an odd feeling of tranquility. "You can choose that," I said softly. "You are free to choose not to attend my wedding, rather than go with your kids." Jessica gaped in surprise as she looked at me for a while. Then she began packing her children's belongings, stuffing toys into bags. "Boys, hurry up," she shouted. "We're heading out. You are no longer welcome in your Aunt Robin's life." I did not say that. She was already injuring the lads as they approached the door when I started. "I hope your ideal low-key wedding is making you happy." Over her shoulder, she spit. Then she slammed the door so violently the windows shook. I looked to my parents as Jessica stormed out, hoping to see understanding on their faces. They had been coping with my nephew's craziness for years, after all. Rather, I discovered them staring at me with dismay. "Robin, how could you?" Mom's voice was calm yet harsh. "Those are your nephews, Mom. You've seen how they behave?" "Incredulous," I replied. You witnessed what occurred at Christmas? They're only kids. Dad got right in. You're being extremely selfish. What I was hearing was unbelievable. Selfish. How can wanting a calm wedding day be selfish? One day that I want to be beautiful without eating, conflicts or yelling or chaos. Dad's face stiffened. Then you need to reevaluate your decision. We won't be attending, so either invite your nephews. The words struck me like a punch to the body. I stared at their faces. These parents appeared older than their years due to the burden of raising 3 rowdy sons who were now threatening to ruin their younger daughter's wedding because she desired a quiet day. They had witnessed their home being damaged innumerable times. All right, I responded. My kid. Remarkably steady. You may choose that. Don't come. I drove directly to James's residence after leaving their house. He and his parents instantly came together to support me once I informed them of what had transpired. Diana, you are quite correct to desire a calm wedding. I was reassured by my future mother-in-law. Nobody should be able to make you feel bad about it. I formally declared it that night. On Facebook, I made the announcement. James and I are thrilled to declare that there won't be any children at our wedding. We are excited to share our wonderful day in a classy and serene setting with our adult guests. The outpouring of support was tremendous. Friends, cousins, and even distant relatives expressed their support by liking and commenting. My cousin Sarah wrote that she fully understood. I will get a babysitter for the children. I'm excited to join you in celebrating. Jessica then added a remark. You are a disgrace, Robin. Your self-centeredness is destroying this family. My kids have always made you envious, and now you're keeping them out of this significant family occasion. I hope you're content with who you are. The reaction came suddenly and without warning. Family members who had seen the Christmas catastrophe rushed to my support. Your children ruined the Christmas party at Linda's, Jessica. They forced half the family to leave early and damaged gifts that weren't theirs to eat. Perhaps you should concentrate on teaching your kids appropriate public behavior instead than bashing Robin. My nephew's misbehavior and Jessica's poor parenting skills were mentioned in one comment after another, and Great Aunt Martha added her voice. The post became a list of years of mayhem and devastation, all of which Jessica had ignored or disregarded. Jessica's answers came to a halt. For once. Perhaps since the whole family was now united against her for the first time, she had nothing to say to justify her children's actions. 3 days after the Facebook post went viral, I noticed my mother on the caller ID when my phone called. Even though my stomach ached, I responded. Robin, Mom spoke softly. I noticed your post and all of the responses, as did your father. We were unaware that so many others shared this sentiment. Listening to everyone recount the events of Christmas and every other event. Honey, we'll be at your wedding. Dad added his voice. Whether your sister is present or not, your ideal day is something you deserve. The relief was tremendous. Thank you. I was able to speak while crying. To me, that is everything. Following our talk, I wrote a handwritten message and gave Jessica and David a formal wedding invitation. I hope both of you can join us in celebrating. This is essential to me. Even though I know it's hard without the guys. Robin, love. There was no reaction for weeks. Jessica's stillness turned into her response when the RSVP came in. The actual wedding day was all I could have imagined. There were no interruptions throughout the exquisite and tranquil wedding. Adults were able to talk at the reception without having to yell over the commotion. There was no food thrown. No ornaments were damaged. My mother was the only one who wept. As she saw us exchange vows, she shed happy tears. This is beautiful. At the reception, Great Aunt Martha informed me. So calm, so dignified. Under the table, James gripped my hand. He was aware that I was considering the vacant chairs that David and Jessica ought to have occupied. A week following our honeymoon return, Mom phoned to share some news. The lads haven't visited Jessica since your wedding, I said, she said. She refused to answer when I tried to phone her. You're being punished by her for attending my wedding. Silently, I said, perhaps. Mom let out a sigh. But what do you know? Your father and I feel refreshed for the first time in years. We haven't cleaned our house yet. When the day is over. Perhaps this isn't totally a negative thing. I knew what she was talking about. Relationships must occasionally end before they can be effectively reconstructed. Maybe this was the tipping moment for our family. The point at which we admitted the issues that had been developing for years and eventually ceased acting as though nothing was wrong. I'm still holding out hope that Jessica would see that my wedding wasn't about keeping her kids out. The goal was to have one peaceful day. I'm hoping she'll see that her son's actions aren't typical or appropriate, and that allowing them to act out isn't helping them. I'm hoping that one day we may re-establish our friendship based on respect and understanding for one another. Until then, I can still remember my ideal wedding day spent with loved ones who respected and agreed with my decision. I have my new husband and his devoted family, and I know that sometimes it's the proper thing to do to stand up for yourself, even when it's challenging or painful. Story 3. Before I had an evil stepmother of my own, I never believed that fairy tales could come true. Let me begin from the beginning, though. My name is Ashley, and my early years were typical, even affluent, by most standards. My parents lived in a lovely 2-story home in Connecticut and were prosperous company owners. Dad put a lot of effort into starting his business from the bottom up, but Mom had her own priorities. She was constantly out with her pals, particularly her best friend Diana, and was rarely at home. They were inseparable. They shopped at pricey shops, had lengthy lunches at upscale cafes, and had their nails done. As Dad reheated another microwave supper, I recall working alone on my schoolwork at the kitchen table. "Mom, where are you?" Even though I already knew the answer, I would still ask. "Sweetheart, she's out with Diana once more," Dad would say, attempting to conceal his displeasure. "But why don't we make this supper something special?" For dessert, I got your favorite ice cream. Dad did it, always attempting to fulfill both responsibilities in order to make things work. However, he did everything he could to stop what occurred to me when I was 9 years old. That day is still painfully clear in my mind. As usual, Mom arrived home late, but she called a family meeting rather than slinking up to her room. With an uncanny calmness in her voice, she declared, "I'm going. I've developed feelings for someone else. Next month we will be relocating to Europe. Ashley can remain in your sole custody." As simple as that. My mom cut herself out of my life. A shell-shocked father and a bewildered 9-year-old child who couldn't comprehend why she wasn't enough for her own mother were left behind when she packed her belongings and vanished the next day. Diana began to visit more frequently after that. I was happy to see her at first. She was someone I knew, a link to my mother. She would prepare our supper, clean the house, and assist me with my studies. She was all that her mother had not been. Her presence appeared to make Dad happier. They began dating after a few months. Additionally, Dad revealed their impending marriage 6 months after Mom's departure. I recall being relieved. Diana had shown such consideration and kindness. This could have been the mother figure I had been looking for. "Ashley, are you pleased with this?" After telling me about the engagement, Dad inquired. "Yes," I said with a hearty nod. "Diana is pleasant. She looks after us." Diana looked stunning in her white outfit at the lovely wedding. "We're going to be such a lovely family," she said as she gave me a hug at the reception. When they were on their honeymoon, I believed her. God, how I believed her. My grandma took me in, Dad's mother. I wouldn't have any more days like that for a very long time. I could tell as soon as I went through the door of Grandma's house on the day I returned that something had changed. Diana was seated at the table in the kitchen, her tight hands folded perfectly in front of her, her stance. Dad was also present, appearing uneasy. "Ashley," Diana murmured, her voice colder than normal. "We must discuss some modifications." Still carrying my grandmother's rucksack, I took a seat. Dad moved in his seat and avoided looking at me. "I've been talking to your father about your upbringing," Diana added. She stared at me. "You and your mother have some unsettling resemblance, I've observed." "What are you saying?" With a knot in my gut, I asked. "Your demeanor and approach. You obviously need more discipline and organization." She looked at her father. "Honey, don't you agree? We do not wish for her to become like her mother." I closely examined Dad's face. He scowled a little, obviously uneasy. "I may be, though. It would be nice to have some organization. I'll take care of everything." Diana patted his hand and soon reassured him. "My dear, you're quite busy at work. Allow me to handle this." Suddenly, my life was altered. Diana outlined her new guidelines the following day. "My clothing changes came first. From now on, we'll just shop during sales," she declared. For a developing girl, designer clothing is a waste of money. However, that was only the start. Dad typically handed me my weekly money the next weekend, but Diana got in the way. She asked about your pocket money. Her voice was horribly sweet. "You'll have to earn it from now on. Straight A's, 1B, and no weekly allowance." "However, Dad, always," I began to object. "I agree with your father." She interrupted me. "You dare not!" Dad only nodded absently while engrossed in his work laptop. "Ashley, pay attention to Diana. She is aware of what is best." Week after week, the regulations became more stringent. Diana began to keep a journal in which she chronicled all of my transgressions. I didn't make my bed as I hurried to school one morning. A glass was left on the counter, and it was placed in the notepad, rather than being placed in the notebook's dishwasher. I finished my homework, however it wasn't correctly filed in my folder. One more mark. She would sit me down and go over the list every Friday. On Monday, the bed was not made. Wednesday's dishes were excluded. The Hoover was not used on Thursday. She had read with icy contentment. "It appears that there won't be any pocket money this week either. Maybe you'll put forth more effort next week." I saw my former existence go away as many regulations and limitations took its place. Not even the regulations themselves were the worst. It was the way she had changed from the kind person who had assisted me with my schoolwork to this icy, cunning person who seemed to enjoy pointing out my flaws. Furthermore, my father, who had once been my strongest supporter, had turned into a mute spectator who was too preoccupied with his job to take note of what was going on in his own house. I made many attempts to speak with Dad about Diana's rules, catching him during the few times he wasn't preoccupied with his job. "Can we discuss, Dad?" One evening at his home office, I went up to him. He hardly raised his eyes from the screen of his computer. "Ashley, what is it?" "I have a lot going on right now. It has to do with Diana and all of these regulations. They seem a little overdone, don't you think?" At last, he ceased typing within. "Look, honey, I understand that things have changed, but Diana is putting in a lot of effort around here. I'm trying to keep the business going and she's running the house. We ought to be grateful for it. However, Dad, not right now. In 5 minutes, Ashley, I'll be on a conference call. I'm grateful for Grandma. Only she was able to see through Diana's facade as a flawless stepmother when she came to visit. Diana was reprimanding me for leaving a textbook on the coffee table, and she heard it. This is absurd. Grandma lost it. She is not a soldier. She is a child. Throughout boot camp. The ensuing debate was explosive. Diana did a great job playing the victim, sobbing to his father about his mother's deteriorating parenting. She cried, "Your mother doesn't respect my position in this family. How can I properly nurture Ashley while her father, who always takes sides with Diana, is always meddling?" It was a terrible dispute with Grandma. "Maybe you should stop coming around for a while if you can't support my wife," he said to her. Grandma's frequent visits abruptly ceased, but whenever I could, I made my way to her place after school. Those trips turned into my haven, as she lived only 15 streets away. "Sweetheart, don't let her crush your spirit." According to Grandma, she would give me $20. "Put this somewhere she won't look." I got really good at hiding stuff. Grandma gave me tiny gifts and money, even my feelings. I stored my secret stockpile in a loose floorboard beneath my bed. I would touch that floorboard and remind myself that I had at least one person on my side whenever Diana's inspections became more thorough. And then there was the talk that made all the difference. Late one night, when I was 15, I heard voices coming from my parents' room as I was going to the kitchen for water. Diana's remark stopped me cold as the door creaked open. "You shouldn't have to cover her education expenses," Diana said. "You've seen her behavior." That attitude, all of it. Similar to her mom, she will end up precisely the same if you continue to spoil her in this manner, escaping and leaving her family behind. As I waited for my father to protect me, I held my breath. The hush dragged on agonizingly. "Perhaps you could be correct. Uncertainty was evident in his voice as he eventually spoke. However, we made a pledge. It is necessary to reevaluate promises made to unappreciative kids. Diana shoved. Give it some thought, sweetheart. Instead, we may invest that money in our future. I left before hearing more. I spent hours lying awake in my bed, thinking about Diana's remarks. If I desired a future, I knew her power over Dad would only increase. I would have to do it myself. That evening, I decided something. I would put more effort into my studies than previously. Schoolwork would take up every spare time. If it killed me, I would receive a full scholarship to college. Studying, extracurricular activities, and contests dominated the following 2 years. I joined every intellectual group I could locate, including the math, science, and debate teams. On the weekends, I would either study or compete in state events. My room's trophy cabinet gradually grew full with honors. State Science Fair first place. The Regional Debate Championships top speaker, a perfect score on the Olympiad of Maths. It was too much for Diana. She appeared to get angrier with each accomplishment and accolade. However, she was no longer able to criticize me, not when I was getting calls from professors complimenting my performance, not when my academic accomplishments were being highlighted in the local press. The day of graduation finally came. I had succeeded. A full scholarship at the nearby state's Marshall University. I had been waiting for the ideal time to inform them about the letter that had arrived 2 weeks prior. After graduation, I decided to have supper since I figured that even Diana couldn't destroy it on this particular day. I said, still in my graduation robe. I got into Marshall. Complete academic support. Dad's expression brightened. That's incredible. My dear, I'm really pleased with you. For an instant, everything seemed ideal. Diana then put her arms over Dad's shoulders, and I saw her face change into that sickly, endearing look I had come to despise. Oh, sweetheart. Yes, she could. This is fantastic news. However, do you know what might improve it even further? If Ashley came to see the need of genuine independence, Dad looked over at her. What are you saying? Well, Diana went on, her tone brimming with fictitious worry. We must not overindulge her. Although the scholarship is fantastic, perhaps she need to cover her own living expenses, learn to be responsible, and get a job. Dad nodded slowly, and I stared in shock. In fact, that makes sense. Something broke inside of me. All the quiet anguish, all the years of repressed annoyance. And immediately, everything poured forth. Does that make sense? I got up so fast that my chair tipped back. This is all illogical. For years, you have allowed her to have complete power. This house has been transformed into a jail by her, and you simply sit there and do not comply with her orders. Ashley. I wasn't done, but Dad started. You have funds set out for my college already. You did, I'm sure. Years ago I overheard you discussing it. But Diana, let me guess. Didn't you persuade him to use it for anything else? In the same way that you persuaded him to stop inviting Grandma, to cease to be my dad. Diana became furious and her cheeks flushed. You dare. She sprang out of her chair and screamed. Is this your way of saying thank you for everything we've done for you? Appreciation. I gave a sour laugh. For what purpose? For making my adolescence a terrible one. For stealing my monthly stipend. You see? Diana's eyes instantly filled with tears as she turned to see her father. I've been warned you about this very thing. She has absolutely no regard for you. Money, money, money is everything to her. Similar to her mom. I saw my father's face transform into something I had never seen before. His hands trembled as he gently stood up. Silently he murmured, Get out. Diana is correct. Your mother is now precisely like you. Selfish and unappreciative. Only considering yourself. Another woman like her will never live in my home again. Gather your belongings and head off. I felt the words strike me like slaps behind my father's shoulder. Diana's delighted grin was swiftly concealed by a hand raised in a phony state of concern, but I could still see it. I hurried to my room upstairs. My vision is blurred by tears. I dumped my secret stockpile from beneath the floorboard, retrieved my trophies and pictures, and tossed things into my suitcase with trembling hands. I could hear Diana's voice downstairs comforting Dad the entire time. Honey, it's not your fault. It's impossible to help certain folks. It seemed like hours, even though it was only a 15-minute journey to Grandma's place. After opening the door and glancing at my tear-streaked face, she seized me in a strong embrace. I was ejected by him. Into her shoulder, I cried. "I'm just like Mum," he remarked. "Your dad is an idiot," as she assisted me with my stuff, she stated forcefully. "However, you will not allow them to prevail. You are more powerful than that." In order to conserve money, I worked at a nearby bookshop while spending the summer with my grandmother. She assisted me in looking for apartments close to Marshall University. She also gave me an envelope when August arrived. "It's not much, but it should cover your first few months of rent," she explained. "You have the rest to do." At beginning, college was challenging. I took a job as a waiter at a cafe close to university and found a little studio flat that I could almost afford. I had a terrible schedule. Classes in the morning, library study sessions in the afternoon, cafe shifts in the evening, and homework that lasts until midnight. However, it was worthwhile. Diana's smirk always gave me the willpower to keep going when I felt like giving up. The years flew by. I gradually created a new life for myself, made friends, and achieved excellent grades. There were never any calls from home on my phone. Not on holidays or birthdays. I didn't even make the dean's list. Each semester, Grandma, who called every Sunday, was the only link to my former existence. After graduation, I was given a position with Anderson and Mitchell, one of the best consulting businesses in the city. I could easily afford a lovely one-bedroom flat in a pleasant neighborhood with my initial wage. As physical evidence that I had succeeded on my own, I framed my degree and displayed it next to my letter of employment offer. Mike and I met in a coffee shop close to my workplace. It was such a cliché. I practically knocked into him while hurrying to grab my morning latte, spilling his drink all over his suit. I insisted on purchasing him a new one, and somehow that led into supper that evening. Mike was different from anybody I'd ever met. Kind, sincere, and entirely committed to his family. Meeting his parents taught me what a true, loving family looked like. Mike took me back to the coffee shop where we had first met after a year of dating. He got down on one knee right there, taking out a gorgeous diamond ring. "Ashley," he murmured, his voice wavering slightly. "Are you going to wed me?" I replied yes through tears of delight, and the entire coffee shop erupted in cheers. Later that evening, I uploaded a photo of us on Instagram. Me showing off the ring, Mike kissing my cheek, both of us beaming like idiots. Exactly 1 week later, the call arrived. My phone showed an unfamiliar number while I was at work. Something made me answer it. "Hello, Ashley." The voice sent chills down my spine. "A long time has passed." "Diana." My hand gripped the phone more tightly. "You got my number, but how?" "Yes, I do have my methods." She chuckled quietly. "I noticed the announcement of your engagement. It's a pretty ring. You must be ecstatic about organizing the wedding. What are you looking for?" Naturally, to assist. There was a deceptive sweetness in her voice. "Every bride deserves to be escorted down the aisle by her father, you know." A beat skipped in my chest. "What are you discussing?" "I am referring to an agreement. Please. Just a straightforward transaction? $25,000. I'll also persuade your father to make amends with you. On your special day, I'll make sure he's present to accompany you down the aisle. I was ill. What if I say no?" "Okay," she laughed. "Assume for the moment that your father will not be present at the wedding. You are aware of his nature. He follows my instructions. I oversee all of our finances. And where it goes isn't even questioned by that idiot." She continued to speak, her tone becoming more arrogant by the second. "Do you recall how I persuaded him to expel you? So simple. Men are such basic beings. Really? The right words at the right moment, a few tears. In that regard, your father is very foolish." My hand trembled, but not because of terror. In my other hand, I had already launched my work phone's audio recorder app and pressed record. Diana continued to talk, describing years of lies and manipulation. "What say you, my love? Isn't $25,000 a little amount to pay for a father's love?" I compelled myself to speak steadily. "I must give it some thought." "Keep your thoughts short. In a week, the deal will end." With a click, she ended the call. I sat at my workstation and gazed at my phone's recording. Diana reveals her genuine self for 7 minutes and 32 seconds. It is 7 minutes and 32 seconds. That may make all the difference. I played the recording for Mike at our flat that night. With every second that went by, his face became darker. He reached for his phone and said, "We have to send this to your father right now." I covered his hand with mine. "No, I've got a better plan." I opened my laptop with a smile already on my face. She has always taken great care to keep up her flawless appearance. Let's see how she feels about the world seeing her genuine self. With the straightforward title, "My Stepmother's Wedding Gift Demands $25,000 to Let My Father Walk Me Down the Aisle," I posted the video to my social media networks. Pay attention to the conclusion. The reaction was swift and tremendous. The post received hundreds of shares in a matter of hours. Many of the comments were from people who knew Diana intimately. "It's unbelievable that this woman is in charge of our church committee." "You have deserted your family," she informed me. "I'm so sorry. I trusted her. That's why she got that new automobile out of the blue last year." In our little town, the truth about Diana was catching around like wildfire. Her well-crafted facade was coming apart, share by share, post by post. My phone rang 3 days later. Dad was there. "Are you able to return home?" He had a scratchy voice, like if he had been weeping. "Ashley, please, we must speak." I returned to my childhood home after 4 hours of driving. The next day, although the exterior of the house was identical, there was a difference in the way it felt. There was no sign of Diana's pricey SUV in the driveway. She neglected her beloved rose bushes. I was about to knock when Dad answered the door. His hair was grayer than I recalled, and he appeared older and exhausted. After a minute of awkward standing, he drew me into a close embrace. The house was unusually silent inside. Diana was nowhere to be seen. Dad responded to my unasked query by saying, "She's gone." The day after I heard the recording, I evicted her. The following morning, they filed for divorce. He looked despondent as he sank into his favorite recliner. "All these years, Ashley, I've been such a fool. I was completely blind. Her manipulation of me made me turn against you and my own mother." His voice broke. "Every lie she told me I believed. I allowed her to ruin our family." His cheeks began to well up with tears. "You were thrown out by me, my own daughter. I went with her instead of you. How are you ever going to pardon me?" Like I used to do as a child, I sat on the arm of his chair. "Dad, you have my forgiveness." Startled, he looked up, but I went on. "I require time. We cannot act as though those years never occurred. We must gradually mend our friendship." The next half year was a period of recovery. At first, Dad and I spoke on the phone once a week. Initially awkward, it gradually becomes more natural. Every other Saturday, we got together for coffee. Just the two of us sometimes. Mike occasionally joins us. As Dad re-established his bond with her, Grandma began to return to the house, gave me hope for second opportunities. In the meantime, the divorce process proceeded. Dad's attorney used the audio as proof of Diana's dishonesty and manipulation, despite her attempts to fight for half of everything. She ultimately received significantly less than she had anticipated. Rumor had it that she was already searching for her next victim when she relocated out of state. However, we didn't hear from her again. Dad began going to therapy in order to process his remorse and realize how he had allowed himself to be controlled for so long. I finally understood those latter years when he told me something during one of our coffee dates. "Your mother left?" he replied, absently stirring his coffee. "I let someone else take charge because I was so afraid of disappointing you. I was only evading my duties as a father, even if I believed I was protecting you." We became even closer throughout the wedding preparations. From venue hunting to taste testing, Dad insisted on being involved. Cakes. He even attended the rehearsal dinner with Mike's family. It matched their warm, lively, energetic style brilliantly. I got to the bridal room early on the morning of my wedding. Although he knocked on the door with trembling hands, he looked dapper in his tuxedo. "Are you prepared for this?" His voice trembled a little as he asked. "Grandma, I was already wearing my dress and completing my veil. I've spent my entire life preparing for this moment." "Dad!" We waited behind the church doors when he took my hand. The wedding march sounded. "I know I missed so many significant moments in your life, Ashley," he murmured, "but I promise I'm here for all the ones to come." We began walking down the aisle as soon as the doors opened. Mike was grinning as he waited at the altar. Grandma in the first row was already wiping her eyes, and I could see our friends and relatives grinning. Mostly, though, I felt my father's arms beneath my palm, strong and sturdy, finally providing the support I had always needed at the altar. "Who gives this woman to be married?" the clergyman inquired. Dad's words came loud and clear. "I do," as does her granny. I saw Dad and Grandma dancing later at the reception, laughing like I hadn't seen them in a long time. Mike approached me from behind and put his arms around my waist. "Joyful?" he inquired. Leaning back against him, I absorbed the scene. My family has been shattered and reconstructed, becoming stronger where it has been. More than I could have imagined. The adage, "you can't choose your family," isn't totally accurate. To find your family again, sometimes you have to lose them. Learning to appreciate the flaws and creating something new out of them can sometimes lead to a happy ending rather than everything being flawless. Goodbye to Diana, who has been gone from our lives for months. I almost feel thankful for what transpired without the gloom she brought, though. I would never have discovered my strength or known the satisfaction that comes from repairing what was damaged.